The sun barely rose over the horizon, casting long, harsh shadows across the barren planet. Dust swirled in the thin air, making the landscape appear both endless and empty. Among the rocks and dry soil, a lone figure stumbled forward. She was small, fragile-looking, and her clothes were nothing more than rags, torn and worn from months of wandering. Her skin was pale under the dusty coating, and her eyes, wide with fear and fatigue, darted constantly across the terrain. Her name was Lyra, though she had almost forgotten it herself. Names seemed meaningless when survival was all that mattered. She had no home. No one waited for her anywhere. Food was scarce, water even scarcer, and every day felt like a battle against both the planet and the loneliness that gnawed at her spirit. She had learned to move quietly, to avoid creatures that prowled in the shadows, and to hide whenever she sensed danger. But she had no one to teach her beyond the harsh lessons of the world. A sharp wind blew across the plain, carrying dust and tiny stones that cut her skin. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself and stumbled forward. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten in nearly 2 days. Her mouth was dry and her throat burned. She tried to remember the last time she had tasted anything warm or sweet, but it felt like a memory from another life. Every step was heavier than the last, yet she pushed herself onward, hoping, against reason, that something, anything, would change. From the distance, a small shimmer caught her eye. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, but then she saw movement, figures moving across the rocks, carrying strange shapes and glowing devices. Humans. She recognized them immediately from stories she had heard long ago in her childhood. Stories of other travelers who had encountered humans on distant worlds. They were supposed to be brave, inventive, and powerful, but she had never seen one before, and fear stirred in her chest. Humans were unknown, and the unknown had always brought danger. Lyra crouched behind a rock, watching them carefully. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and unlike any other beings she had seen. She could feel her heart racing. Should she approach or stay hidden? Her stomach argued for approaching. They must have food, shelter, warmth, but her instincts screamed caution. She remained still, barely breathing, watching as one human separated from the group, moving slightly off the path. The human paused, looking around, and then his eyes seemed to find her. Lyra froze. His gaze was steady but not hostile. There was a curiosity there and something softer, something almost like concern. She had never seen eyes look at her that way before. She had seen pity, cruelty, indifference, but never care. For a moment she wanted to run, to hide in the rocks and dust, but she could not. His presence was magnetic, pulling at something inside her that she had thought dead. Hope. Then the wind shifted. Dust whipped violently across the landscape and Lyra lost her balance, falling hard against the ground. Pain shot through her leg and she groaned. The human did not move closer at first, but then, almost instinctively, he ran toward her. She scrambled backward, too weak to rise quickly. He came gently, his hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Lyra flinched. The sound of words, spoken by a human, was strange and unfamiliar, yet comforting in its tone. She could not answer. Her tongue felt heavy, her lips dry. The human crouched down, keeping his eyes level with hers. "Do you need help?" he asked again, and this time she nodded faintly, unable to speak. He reached into a small pack at his side, pulling out a piece of cloth. Gently, he draped it over her shoulders. It was clean, soft, and warm, an alien sensation she had almost forgotten existed. He offered her a small container of water, and she drank greedily, her hands trembling as the cool liquid slid down her throat. The human's name, she would later learn, was Elias. He spoke slowly and carefully, aware that she did not understand much of his language. Through gestures, patience, and small actions, he began to teach her how to drink, how to move safely across the rocks, and how to find temporary shelter from the sun and wind. Lyra's eyes, once clouded with fear, began to shine with a faint spark of trust. That night, under the dim light of a distant sun, Lyra lay on a piece of soft fabric the humans had provided. She was not used to comfort. She had not known warmth from another being, nor had she ever felt safe. But here, under the strange stars of this alien world, she felt a strange peace. Elias sat nearby, quietly keeping watch, his eyes scanning the horizon. She watched him for a long time, noticing the calm confidence in his movements, the gentle patience in his expressions. Humans were strange creatures, she realized. They were strong, clever, and yet capable of tenderness. Over the next days, Lyra began to follow Elias and his group at a cautious distance. They explored the rocky plains, mapping out water sources, marking safe paths, and studying the alien creatures that roamed nearby. She learned quickly by observing them. Humans seemed to thrive on teamwork, relying on each other's strengths while compensating for weaknesses. Lyra realized she had never truly known cooperation or loyalty, only survival. And for the first time, she felt that she could belong somewhere, even if it was only a small part of their world. Elias noticed her interest and encouraged her quietly. He would point to objects, make sounds, and show her how things worked without forcing her to understand immediately. She began to mimic him, learning words, gestures, and techniques. The humans' camp became her first true home, though it was temporary and modest. There was food, water, warmth, and, most importantly, kindness. One evening, as the sun set behind jagged cliffs, Elias approached her. "You are safe here," he said softly, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. No one had ever said such words to her before. Safety was something she had only dreamed of, something that had seemed impossible in a world so harsh. Now it was real. Lyra felt a tear slip down her dusty cheek. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed her. Elias smiled gently, understanding without words. He did not rush her, did not demand anything. He simply offered the steady presence of a human who cared, and that was enough. As night fell and stars filled the sky, Lyra lay awake, listening to the quiet sounds of the camp. For the first time in her life, she dreamed not of survival but of belonging. She thought of the humans' laughter, their courage in the face of danger, and their care for one another. She thought of Elias, and a small warmth blossomed in her chest, a tiny flame of hope she had never felt before. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new challenges. The planet was still dangerous, and she was still weak. But she would face them with humans by her side. And for the first time, Lyra understood something important. She was not truly alone anymore. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, life could be more than survival. Maybe it could be hope. And in that moment, under the alien stars and the watchful eyes of Elias, Lyra took her first real step toward a life she had never imagined. A life that might, one day, be filled with warmth, friendship, and belonging. The next morning, the sun rose slowly, painting the barren plains with a soft golden glow. Lyra stirred beneath the thin blanket the humans had provided. She felt stronger than the day before, though her muscles ached and her stomach still growled, faintly. For the first time in weeks, she did not wake in panic. There was a sense of quiet security that wrapped around her like a gentle hand. Elias was already awake, moving quietly among the other humans, preparing supplies for the day. His eyes met hers briefly and he nodded. A simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. Lyra had spent the night observing the humans, noticing the way they worked together. One of them was arranging small containers filled with water, another adjusting strange devices that hummed softly. Their teamwork was precise, coordinated, and purposeful. She had never seen such organization or unity before. In her world, survival was always lonely, always a fight against chance and cruelty. But here, she realized, humans did not fight alone. Hesitantly, she stepped out from her small shelter and approached the camp. Elias smiled softly and gestured for her to stay close. She obeyed, following him as he moved through the camp. The other humans watched her with curiosity. Some smiled gently, others observed silently, unsure of how to react to someone so different. Elias did not leave her side. He knew that patience would be the key to helping her trust them fully. "Food," Elias said, pointing to a small container of fruit-like objects. He offered it to her with careful hands. Lyra stared at it for a moment. It was unfamiliar, colorful, and smelled sweet. Hunger won over hesitation, and she took a piece, biting carefully. The taste surprised her. It was sweet, juicy, and warm in her mouth. She had never known food could taste this way. She glanced at Elias, unsure how to show gratitude, but his smile told her that words were not necessary. As the morning passed, the humans prepared for exploration. They had a mission to study the surrounding terrain and map resources for their long-term settlement. Lyra watched with fascination. They moved swiftly, confidently, their tools precise and effective. Elias noticed her interest and gestured for her to follow. She hesitated. Could she keep up? Would she be safe? Yet curiosity and a spark of courage propelled her forward. The humans moved across jagged rocks and steep hills, their steps sure and measured. Lyra stumbled often, her weak legs protesting the effort, but Elias stayed close, occasionally extending a hand to steady her or help her over an obstacle. Slowly, she began to mimic their movements, learning how to balance on uneven ground and conserve her energy. The humans' skill and endurance amazed her. They seemed almost tireless, always adapting to the challenges of the harsh environment. Around midday, Lyra felt a strange sense of excitement. They had reached a small plateau with a view of the valley below. Strange plants with thick, waxy leaves grew sparsely across the ground, and a few small creatures scuttled near the rocks. Lyra crouched to observe one of the creatures, fascinated by its quick movements and unusual shape. Elias knelt beside her and pointed to it, making soft, descriptive sounds. Slowly, she began to understand, recognizing the connections between words and actions. Then a sudden noise shattered the calm. A low, guttural growl echoed across the plateau. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. From behind a rock, a large creature emerged. Its skin was rough, armored, and its eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight. It moved with surprising speed, and its gaze locked onto the humans. Fear surged through her body. She had seen such creatures before in her wanderings, and she knew how deadly they could be. "Stay calm," Elias whispered, his voice steady but firm. He gestured for Lyra to step back behind him. The humans quickly formed a defensive line, their strange tools humming with energy. The creature advanced cautiously, testing their resolve. Lyra's mind raced. She wanted to run, but Elias's calm presence reminded her that she was not alone. The humans were strong, and they had experience she could not begin to understand. The creature lunged suddenly, its claws scraping the rocky ground. Elias moved swiftly, intercepting it with a tool that emitted a bright flash of light. The creature recoiled, startled but not defeated. Lyra's fear intensified as another growl echoed from nearby rocks. More of the creatures were approaching. She realized the humans were outnumbered. Panic surged through her chest, but she also felt a strange determination. She would not let fear paralyze her. She would try to help. Elias noticed her hesitation and gave a small nod. He extended his hand toward her, indicating that she should move to safety. But Lyra saw a small path that could lead them away from the creatures. Acting on instinct, she pointed and whispered in her own language, trying to indicate her plan. Elias hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Together, they guided the humans along the path, moving quickly but carefully. The creatures pursued them, but the humans' teamwork and strategy kept them just ahead. Lyra observed everything, learning quickly. She noticed how they communicated silently, using gestures and eye contact, how they relied on each other's strengths, and how they never gave up even when danger loomed. In that moment, she understood something important. Humans were extraordinary. They were not just strong or clever. They were united, disciplined, and fearless when protecting those they cared for. Finally, they reached a narrow canyon that forced the creatures to stop their chase. Breathing heavily, Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. Elias knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are safe," he said again. The words, simple as they were, filled her with warmth and relief. She had faced death and danger, yet here she was, alive and protected. For the first time, she realized that she could survive, not just by hiding or running, but by trusting others. The humans led her back to the camp, where they checked her for injuries and offered food and water. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and drank deeply. She felt a strange sense of belonging, a feeling that had been absent from her life for as long as she could remember. Elias stayed nearby, watching her with quiet attention. She did not need to speak to know he understood her thoughts and fears. Over the next few days, Lyra began to learn more about the humans. They taught her simple tasks: how to gather water safely, how to identify edible plants, and how to move quietly across difficult terrain. She discovered that humans were patient teachers, willing to repeat instructions without anger or frustration. Slowly, she began to understand their words and actions, building a bridge between her old life of fear and the new life of hope. One evening, as the sky turned shades of red and gold, Lyra sat beside Elias near a small fire. The warmth of the flames contrasted with the cold wind, and she felt something she had never felt before: comfort. She looked at Elias, noticing the lines of concentration and care on his face, the gentleness in his eyes. She wanted to say something, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of gratitude and trust. Elias smiled softly, understanding without need for language. In that moment, Lyra realized that humans were not just survivors. They were protectors, guides, and friends. They had taught her a lesson she could never have learned alone: that life could be more than mere existence. It could be shared, nurtured, and enriched by the presence of others. As night fell and the stars blinked into existence above the alien sky, Lyra lay on the soft blankets, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She watched the humans move around the camp, their interactions full of purpose and care. She thought of the dangers they had faced together, the lessons they had imparted, and the quiet moments of kindness that had restored a sense of hope in her soul. For the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. She had food, shelter, and warmth. She had humans who cared for her and taught her to survive. And she had Elias, a presence that filled her with a quiet sense of safety, a gentle promise that the world could be different from what she had always known. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope began to grow. A thought she had never allowed herself to entertain whispered in her mind. Maybe she could belong. Maybe life could be more than hunger, fear, and loneliness. And maybe, just maybe, the humans, so strange, so strong, so kind, could show her a future she had never imagined. As the fire crackled and the night air settled, Lyra closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the moment fill her heart. She did not yet know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she would face it. Not alone, not fearful, but with humans by her side. And in that knowledge she found something precious, the first true taste of hope. Days passed on the alien plains, and Lyra began to notice changes in herself. Her steps were steadier, her hands less clumsy, and her mind sharper. Under Elias's quiet guidance, she was learning more than just survival. She was learning to observe, to plan, and to adapt. The humans' routines fascinated her. Every action had a purpose, every movement calculated, and every member of the group relied on the other's skills. For Lyra, who had spent years alone, the harmony of the humans' teamwork was both comforting and inspiring. Elias took particular care to include her in small tasks. He showed her how to collect water from hidden streams, how to identify plants that could be eaten or used for medicine, and how to navigate the rocky terrain without injury. At first, Lyra struggled. Her body was weak, and her confidence had been eroded by years of fear. But Elias' patience never wavered. He guided her hands when she faltered and offered soft encouragement when she wanted to give up. "You can do this," he would say, his voice steady. "I know you can." Slowly, Lyra began to trust not only Elias but herself. She discovered that she could climb rocks more quickly than she expected, that her eyes could spot hidden paths, and that her instincts could guide her when she doubted herself. Each small success filled her with a quiet pride. She began to understand that humans were not only strong, they were patient, resourceful, and encouraging. Their abilities were not only in their strength, but in their willingness to support each other. One afternoon, the group decided to explore a nearby canyon. The wind whistled sharply through the narrow passageways, and the rocks glistened with the faint sheen of moisture from the occasional rains. Lyra followed closely behind Elias, mimicking his movements as he carefully tested each step before putting his full weight down. At one point, a loose stone gave way beneath her foot. She slipped, but Elias's hand shot out instinctively, catching her before she fell. She looked into his eyes, her chest tightening. That small protective gesture spoke more than words ever could. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elias only nodded, offering a small smile. There was no need for grandeur, no need for ceremony. His presence alone, steady and unwavering, was enough to calm her. As the humans moved deeper into the canyon, Lyra began to understand their subtle ways of communication. They rarely spoke loudly. Instead, they used gestures, glances, and quiet signals to coordinate with each other. She noticed how Elias often glanced at her, checking to make sure she was keeping pace, but never hovering or forcing her. He allowed her space to learn, to try, and to succeed on her own. This balance between guidance and independence was foreign to Lyra, but it was also comforting. She was not coddled, nor was she abandoned. She was allowed to grow. By evening, they had set up a small camp at the canyon's edge. Lyra watched as the humans worked together to prepare food, secure their equipment, and build a small fire. She felt a sense of fascination mixed with admiration. Every movement was purposeful, yet there was a rhythm to their work, almost like a dance. She wanted to help but was unsure how. Elias noticed her hesitation. "Would you like to try?" he asked, gently, holding out a small bundle of supplies. Lyra nodded and took the bundle, mimicking his movements as best she could. At first, she fumbled, dropping pieces and making small mistakes. But Elias guided her hands patiently, showing her how to arrange them efficiently. Gradually, her confidence grew. By the time the fire was crackling warmly, Lyra had arranged the supplies neatly, earning a small nod of approval from Elias and a few quiet smiles from the others. That night, under the soft glow of the stars, Lyra felt something stirring in her heart. She had begun to feel connected to the humans in a way she had never experienced before. Their actions, their care, and their quiet courage had opened a space within her that had been empty for so long. She realized that humans were not only capable of strength, they were capable of teaching, guiding, and inspiring hope. Elias sat near the fire, quietly observing her. "You are learning quickly," he said softly. Lyra looked at him, unsure how to respond. Words still felt fragile, too delicate to express the depth of what she felt. Elias seemed to understand without them. He only smiled, and that simple gesture conveyed patience, encouragement, and trust. Over the following days, Lyra continued to improve. She climbed rocks more easily, navigated paths without hesitation, and even began to anticipate the humans' movements in certain situations. Elias often allowed her to try tasks alone, only stepping in when necessary. Through this, Lyra learned not only skill, but also confidence. She was beginning to see herself not as a fragile, lost being, but as someone capable of contributing, of surviving, and of belonging. One afternoon, while exploring a small plateau above the canyon, Lyra spotted a young creature trapped in a narrow crevice. It squeaked in fear, struggling to free itself. Lyra's first instinct was to panic. She had always been afraid of other creatures. But then she remembered Elias's lessons. Observe, plan, act carefully. She moved slowly, speaking in soft tones to calm the creature. Carefully, she dislodged a small rock, creating space for it to escape. The creature bolted, disappearing into the distance, and Lyra felt a thrill of accomplishment. Elias appeared, beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said simply. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. This small success, witnessed and acknowledged by Elias, reinforced the growing bond between them. She was not alone. She was seen. And in that recognition, she found both pride and belonging. As days turned into weeks, Lyra's relationship with the humans deepened. She laughed at their jokes, learned to anticipate their movements, and even began to understand some of their words. Elias spent time with her individually, teaching her about the human ways of problem-solving, observation, and creativity. Lyra discovered that humans valued intelligence, courage, and kindness, not just physical strength. She began to admire their ingenuity, their willingness to face challenges, and their unwavering care for one another. One evening, while the group rested by a small pool of water, Elias sat beside Lyra. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the sky glowed with shades of violet and gold. "You are growing stronger," he said softly. "And not just in body, in your mind and heart as well." Lyra looked at him, feeling a mix of pride and vulnerability. No one had ever spoken to her about her mind or her heart before. She had been measured only by her ability to survive. Now she realized she was being seen as more than that. Lyra felt a deep gratitude toward Elias. His quiet patience, his gentle guidance, and his unwavering belief in her had begun to shape her in ways she could hardly express. She wanted to say something to convey the depth of her feelings, but words failed her. Elias seemed to understand anyway, offering only a soft smile and a reassuring presence. That was enough. As night fell and the stars sparkled above, Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known. The humans were no longer strangers. They were her protectors, her teachers, and her companions. Elias had become a quiet anchor in her turbulent world, a presence she could rely on without fear. And for the first time she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for a future where she could belong, grow, and live with purpose. Deep within her, a small voice whispered that life could be more than fear and loneliness. It could be shared, nurtured, and filled with connection. The humans had shown her that. And in that knowledge, Lyra felt a spark of something powerful, the beginning of trust, friendship, and perhaps one day, love. As the camp settled for the night, Lyra lay beside Elias, watching the fire flicker and listening to the gentle sounds of the humans around her. She felt safe, cared for, and inspired. Her past, filled with hunger, cold, and fear, seemed distant now. She was learning a new way to live, guided by humans who had opened her eyes to hope, courage, and belonging. And somewhere deep inside, Lyra knew that she was no longer the lost wanderer she had once been. She was becoming part of something larger than herself, a community, a family, and a world where humans' extraordinary qualities could show her the meaning of trust, kindness, and courage. The morning sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the rocky plains. Lyra awoke with a sense of quiet anticipation. She had grown stronger and more confident since joining Elias and the humans, but today felt different. An uneasy tension hung in the air. The humans moved with unusual caution, scanning the horizon and whispering among themselves. Elias approached her first. His expression was calm but serious. "Stay close today," he said, offering a hand. Lyra nodded, feeling the reassuring strength of his presence. She had learned to trust his instincts, and today she understood that caution could mean survival. The group set out toward a distant ridge, their steps purposeful and measured. Birds of strange shapes and colors circled overhead, and the dry wind carried the scent of distant rocks and plants. Lyra followed closely, careful not to fall behind. She had learned from observing the humans that every movement, every glance, Every decision mattered. She felt pride in her ability to keep pace, yet a shadow of fear lingered in her chest. Suddenly, a sharp, echoing cry tore through the air. Lyra froze. Elias immediately dropped into a crouch, signaling the others to do the same. From behind a cluster of jagged rocks, creatures emerged. They were larger and more numerous than anything Lyra had seen before. Their skin was rough and armored, and their eyes glowed with a faint red light. They moved quickly, coordinating, with frightening intelligence. The humans reacted swiftly. Elias gestured to the group and each member took a position. Strange devices hummed to life, projecting bright energy fields that deterred the creatures temporarily. Lyra's heart raced. She had never seen humans in such action before. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. The creatures were powerful, but the humans were fearless, protecting each other and her with unwavering determination. One of the creatures lunged directly at Lyra. She stumbled backward, panic surging through her, but Elias was already in motion. With lightning speed, he intercepted the creature, using his device to block its attack. The force sent him staggering, yet he remained steadfast. "Move!" he shouted, guiding Lyra to safety behind a boulder. His voice was calm but urgent, a lifeline in the chaos. Lyra crouched behind the rock, watching the battle unfold. Her chest pounded as she saw humans fight with courage and ingenuity. They did not flee, even when outnumbered. They relied on teamwork, covering each other's weaknesses and protecting the vulnerable. Lyra realized that their strength was not just in their weapons or skill, but in their loyalty and selflessness. They fought not for glory but to protect one another, and her. Another wave of creatures approached. Lyra's fear surged again, but she also felt a strange determination. She could not remain passive. Carefully, she observed the creatures' movements, noticing patterns and weaknesses. Using the lessons Elias had taught her, she picked up a small rock and tossed it to distract one of the creatures. It reacted, and the humans seized the opportunity to advance. Lyra's small action contributed to their strategy. She had never felt so alive. Elias returned after subduing one of the creatures. He knelt beside her, checking for injuries. "You did well," he said softly. Lyra shook her head, overwhelmed by fear and awe. "You helped," he insisted, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Every action matters. You are part of this team now." The battle continued for what felt like hours, though it was only a few minutes in reality. The humans moved with coordination that amazed Lyra. They used their devices to create barriers, redirected the creature's attention, and communicated silently through gestures and glances. Lyra learned quickly by watching, realizing that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Finally, the creatures retreated, disappearing into the rocky plains. The humans regrouped, their breathing heavy but controlled. Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. She had faced real danger and survived. She had witnessed humans' bravery firsthand, and it had left an impression deeper than words could express. Elias approached her again. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. He smiled, a small, quiet expression of reassurance. "You were brave," he said. "You faced fear and still acted. That is important." Lyra's heart swelled. No one had ever spoken to her this way, acknowledging her courage, seeing her as capable. She realized she had begun to trust not just Elias but herself. The group returned to their camp, moving cautiously through the rocky landscape. Lyra walked beside Elias, matching his pace. She noticed the care he showed toward every member of the group, ensuring no one was left behind. It struck her that human strength was not only physical but moral. Their loyalty, courage, and compassion were qualities she had never known in such abundance. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Lyra sat beside Elias near a small fire. The humans prepared their evening meal, quietly tending to equipment and supplies. Lyra felt a sense of calm despite the morning's chaos. She had learned that fear could be managed, that danger could be faced, and that humans had a remarkable ability to protect and inspire hope. Elias handed her a small piece of warm food. "Eat," he said gently. She took it, savoring the taste. It was simple yet comforting. She looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude. Words were still fragile for her, but Elias understood without them. He only smiled, a silent acknowledgement of her feelings. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to learn from the humans. They practiced survival skills, explored new areas, and studied the planet's creatures and resources. Each day brought new challenges, yet Lyra faced them with growing confidence. She realized that courage was contagious. Being surrounded by humans who acted with determination and care inspired her to act bravely as well. One afternoon, while exploring a small canyon, Lyra stumbled across a young creature trapped under a fallen rock. Its cries echoed through the narrow passage. Lyra froze, her fear returning, but she remembered Elias's teachings. Carefully she approached, speaking softly to the creature and assessing the situation. She lifted the rock with all her strength, freeing the frightened creature. It bolted into the canyon, disappearing into the distance. Lyra felt a thrill of accomplishment. Elias appeared beside her, nodding with quiet approval. "You are learning quickly," he said. Lyra smiled faintly, a warmth spreading in her chest. She had begun to understand that humans valued not only strength but observation, intelligence, and courage. Small actions, thoughtful decisions, and empathy were as important as physical skill. She felt a deep admiration for Elias and the humans, and an unspoken bond began to form between her and Elias, a trust built on shared experiences and quiet understanding. That night, as the stars blinked above the alien sky, Lyra lay near the fire, thinking of the past few days. She had faced danger, learned new skills, and seen humans' extraordinary bravery and compassion firsthand. Her fear and loneliness were gradually being replaced by trust, hope, and belonging. She realized that she had begun to see life differently. It was no longer a struggle for mere survival. It was a journey of courage, connection, and discovery. Elias sat nearby, quietly observing the camp. His presence was a steady comfort, a reminder that she was no longer alone. Lyra felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had taught her patience, courage, and hope without ever demanding anything in return. She had begun to understand that humans' strength was not only in their actions but in their hearts, their ability to care, protect, and inspire. Deep inside, Lyra felt a spark of something she had never known before: belonging. She had survived alone for so long, but now she was part of something greater, a group, a community, and a world where humans' extraordinary qualities could guide her toward hope, trust, and courage. And she realized that, with Elias by her side, she could face anything that came her way. For the first time, Lyra understood that the world could be more than harsh and lonely. It could be filled with care, bravery, and connection. And it was the humans, their courage, their patience, and their unwavering protection, that had shown her the way. As the fire crackled and the night grew quiet, Lyra closed her eyes. She felt safe, inspired, and for the first time in her life, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The morning would come with new dangers, but she knew she was not alone. Humans, and Elias in particular, had shown her that life could be more than survival. It could be filled with trust, hope, and extraordinary courage. And somewhere deep within, Lyra knew that this trust, this bond, would guide her toward a future she had never dared to imagine. The sun rose over the rocky plains with a soft golden light, bathing the alien landscape in warmth. Lyra stepped out of her small shelter and took a deep breath. The air was crisp, the world quiet, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm. She was no longer the frightened wanderer who had stumbled across the humans weeks ago. She was stronger, wiser, and most importantly, she belonged. Elias approached her, a gentle smile on his face. "Good morning," he said softly. Lyra smiled back, feeling a wave of gratitude. Words were no longer difficult for her. She could speak in simple sentences, share her thoughts, and even laugh, a sound she had not heard herself make in years. Today, the humans planned to explore a new valley they had discovered. It was rumored to be rich with water and edible plants, and the group needed to map it for their settlement. Lyra followed closely behind Elias, moving with confidence and purpose. She noticed how every member of the group worked together, supporting each other with patience and care. Their unity had become a model for her, showing that survival was more than strength. It was teamwork, loyalty, and courage. As they descended into the valley, Lyra observed the unusual flora and fauna. Strange plants with bright leaves and small flowers grew alongside streams of clear water. Tiny creatures scurried among the rocks, some curious, some cautious. Lyra's eyes sparkled with wonder. For the first time, she felt a true sense of curiosity, not fear. She touched a smooth stone, watched a creature dart by, and marveled at the life around her. She realized the planet was not only harsh but also beautiful, full of surprises waiting to be discovered. Elias noticed her fascination and gently guided her to a small stream. "See?" he said, pointing to the water. "It is safe to drink. Here." Lyra knelt, cupping her hands, and drank deeply. The cool water refreshed her, washing away both thirst and lingering anxiety. She looked at Elias, her eyes shining with gratitude. He only smiled, offering no words. His presence alone communicated trust, protection, and care. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. Lyra froze, her instincts telling her to run, but Elias stood firmly, signaling her to stay calm. From the undergrowth, a group of small, timid creatures emerged. They watched the humans cautiously, their eyes wide. Lyra felt a strange connection to them. She remembered how alone she had felt, how fear had ruled her every step. And now, surrounded by humans who had taught her courage and compassion, she realized she could face the unknown without panic. Carefully, she stepped forward, mimicking Elias's calm movements. She extended her hand gently toward the creatures. At first, they hesitated, but then a small one approached, sniffing her fingers. Lyra smiled softly, feeling a surge of joy. Elias nodded quietly, proud of her bravery. This small interaction, simple as it was, symbolized her growth. She had learned to trust herself, to act with care, and to face uncertainty with courage. As they continued their exploration, the humans worked together to mark safe paths, collect samples of plants, and observe the creatures. Lyra eagerly participated, using the skills Elias had taught her. She identified edible plants, helped guide the group across slippery rocks, and even assisted in creating a small barrier to protect them from sudden gusts of wind. Each action reinforced her sense of belonging. She was not just an observer anymore. She was part of the team. By late afternoon, the group reached a high ridge overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking. Streams wound through lush vegetation and distant cliffs glowed in the sunlight. Lyra stood beside Elias, taking in the beauty. She felt a warmth in her heart, a feeling she had never experienced before. Hope. The world was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, yet here she was, surrounded by humans who had shown her the way to live with courage, wisdom, and care. Elias turned to her, his expression gentle. "You have come far," he said. "You are no longer the same Lyra who wandered alone. You are strong, capable, and brave." Lyra felt a lump in her throat. Words were still fragile, but she whispered, "Thank you." Elias nodded, understanding without needing more. His quiet presence, his patience, and his care had been her guide, showing her that humans could inspire hope even in the darkest times. As night fell, the group set up camp near the ridge. The stars appeared, twinkling above the alien landscape. Lyra sat beside Elias near the fire, feeling a deep sense of peace. The humans moved around the camp, tending to their tasks, yet their laughter and soft conversations filled the air with warmth. Lyra realized that she had never known such a sense of community. The humans had shown her that life could be more than survival. It could be shared, nurtured, and filled with connection. Elias sat closer to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. He placed a gentle hand on hers. "Stay with me," he whispered softly. Lyra looked at him, her heart racing. For years she had wandered alone, abandoned and afraid. Now here was a human offering more than protection. He offered companionship, trust, and a place in the world. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, hope, and wonder. Lyra nodded, her voice barely audible. I will stay." Elias smiled, a quiet, heartfelt expression that conveyed more than words could. In that moment, Lyra felt the weight of her past lift from her shoulders. She had found a home, a family, and a future she had never dared to imagine. The following days were filled with exploration, learning, and shared experiences. Lyra grew more confident with each passing moment, her bond with Elias and the humans strengthening. She helped gather resources, discovered new plants, and even assisted in mapping safe paths through the rocky terrain. Each task reminded her that she was part of something greater, a team, a family, and a world where humans' extraordinary qualities could guide her toward hope and belonging. One morning, the group discovered a small cave with traces of water running inside. Lyra explored it with Elias, feeling a sense of excitement and curiosity. Inside, the cave was cool and safe, a perfect spot for temporary shelter. Lyra marveled at the way humans adapted to the environment, creating a secure space with simple tools and clever techniques. She realized that human strength lay not only in their courage, but also in their intelligence, creativity, and ability to inspire others. That evening, as the sun set, Lyra and Elias stood together outside the cave, watching the sky change colors. The stars began to shine, and the wind whispered softly across the valley. Lyra felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had survived alone for so long, but now she was part of a group that valued her, protected her, and taught her to be brave. She had found more than safety. She had found belonging, purpose, and hope. Elias looked at her with quiet affection. "You have come a long way," he said, "and now you have a choice. You can stay with us, continue to learn, and be part of this world, or you can wander again." Lyra's heart swelled. She thought of her past, the endless loneliness, the fear, the cold nights, but none of it mattered now. She had found a place where she belonged, with humans who had shown her courage, kindness, and hope. "I will stay," she said firmly, her voice steady. Elias smiled, placing a gentle hand on hers. In that touch, Lyra felt the promise of a future filled with care, learning, and shared experiences. She realized that humans were extraordinary, not only in strength and courage, but in their ability to nurture, inspire, and protect, and she was grateful beyond words that she had been allowed to witness and become part of it. Over the following weeks, Lyra fully embraced life with the humans. She learned to cook simple meals, navigate challenging terrain, and even communicate more fluently with her companions. Her laughter joined theirs around the campfire, and her presence became a source of joy and energy. She had transformed from a lost, lonely wanderer into a confident, capable member of a team. Elias remained her guide and friend, always patient, always kind. Their bond deepened with each passing day. He taught her not only survival skills but also the importance of compassion, trust, and hope. Lyra began to see life differently, not as a struggle for mere survival but as a journey filled with learning, connection, and shared experiences. One quiet night, under a sky full of stars, Elias whispered once more, "Stay with me forever." Lyra looked at him, her heart full. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I will," she replied softly. In that moment, the past seemed distant and the future felt bright and promising. She had found safety, friendship, and hope. She had found humans who had shown her what it meant to live fully, bravely, and with heart. Lyra realized that her journey was only beginning. The world was vast, full of challenges and wonders, but she no longer faced it alone. She had found courage in the humans' example, trust in their care, and a sense of belonging she had never thought possible. And with Elias by her side, she knew she could face anything. The story closed with the group moving together through the valley, Lyra walking beside Elias, her steps confident and steady. The alien sun shone warmly. The wind carried the scent of life, and the stars above promised endless possibilities. For Lyra, the lost wanderer, life had transformed into a journey of hope, courage, and connection. A journey she would share forever with humans who had shown her the extraordinary power of care, bravery, and trust.